some general Q&As. So who is keen to get involved with that? Where are the tutors here? Who's around? We got Shreya, who is Cambridge offer holder, and you have got offers from which places? I think it's all four, right?
Yeah, so I have offers from Bristol, Imperial, UCL, and Cambridge.
Amazing. And we've got as well Akhil, who is also Cambridge offer holder.
Yeah, hi, nice to meet you guys.
Nice to meet you guys. And we also have Sahib. Are you here?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hello, Sahib. And Sahib is going Oxford.
Hmm.
So nice to meet all of you. And the person asking is Oxbridge interviews online. Oxford is all online. Cambridge is mostly online. A couple of colleges are in person. Or actually, might just be Trinity. Akhil, do you know any Cambridge colleges in person?
I know my college was online, so that's Magdalen. I know King's maybe. I know Keys does, Gonville and Keys, they do a few which are in person. I'm not sure if Shreya knows any more than me about that.
Only a very small number, if any. So
Yeah.
majority will be online, and they do publish on their website which one is in person. Actually, I think there are a few. And if you want an in-person interview, you can then apply to one of those. And I remember some people this year did. So Cambridge Medicine in-person interview. I think there are four or five. They've made a list. Um, where's the list of colleges? But it might change by then anyway. So I'll send the list on the chat later. But at this stage, you don't necessarily need to worry about which one. And online versus in person is not a huge difference because everyone is doing online or everyone is doing in person. So it's not that you will be at a relative disadvantage either way. Right. Let's stick with more academic sort of questions rather than admin ones. I'll talk about recordings later. How do we choose Oxbridge colleges? So you kind of decide yourself if you have any preferences. And so if there's one that you like for Oxford, based on kind of just the vibes there, by talking to people there, you can pick that one. If you're not sure for Oxford, you can also send an open application. And what you'll find is that a large proportion of people who do get offers will get an offer from a college that they did not apply to. For Cambridge, you kind of have to pick a college, and again, you would just do that based on maybe the one you like or what you've heard good things about. At Oxford, the process is entirely centralized, so there's no strategicness when selecting a college. Your chances are equal. At Cambridge, the chances can vary a little bit between them, so at times it may be worth looking at admission stats. And so, Akhil, Shreya, how did you go about picking your college?
So I kind of went to the open day and saw which one I liked best. And also, I spoke to some of the students who were talking about the kinds of research they were doing. And I kind of looked on the college websites to see what opportunities were there. There's also a part on the Cambridge website where you can see all of their admission statistics. So it's breakdown by ethnicity, gender, loads of different things like that. So if that's important to you, that's definitely somewhere where you can check on the website and it might help you pick which college.
Great advice. And Akhil?
Yeah, mine was similar. So I went on an open day and I went to my college and I liked how central it was. I liked it looked quite nice. It had that sort of traditional Cambridge sort of vibe. So I sort of liked that too. And yeah, I also like the students there too. They seem quite friendly. But yeah, I would say it does differ college by college, but you'll get the same sort of teaching wherever you go in Cambridge. It's all really high quality.
For sure. And I mean, there is the potential to strategize by college and to look at competition ratios. Honestly, I don't think it's worth it. Reason being, if we say that, okay, which one had a pretty decent ratio in a certain year, and we think, okay, well, this one didn't get very many applicants relative to places, well, everyone can see those stats. So it's not necessary that the ones which are less competitive that year will be more competitive this year or vice versa. And it's the same for stuff like UCAT or BMAT statistics. So I wouldn't necessarily try and strategize that aspect. I would probably pick the one you like. But if you are looking for data, then it's all linked in our guide. You can go explore on the Cambridge website as well. Whereas for Oxford, that's not the case. They all shortlist in the same way. So let's see what other questions we've got. Sahib, should you give your opinion about choosing a college for Oxford? Yes, you can.
Hello. So, for me, I was lucky enough to have like a link with one of the colleges. So from Berkshire and South Oxford, I think they have like certain colleges which are linked specifically to my area. So they actually came to our school and spoke to us. And I really wanted to go to a college which had a lot of state school students or just not really private school students. So if that's something you wanted, then I'd definitely look at that a bit more in detail. But also I kind of just wanted to be somewhere that was sort of close to the medical department, but also didn't have the reputation for being either too snobby or just, having too much work. So basically just looking at all these different factors. And obviously, like Oja said, it is done centrally. So there's no point really looking at statistics for colleges, especially at Oxford, because it's done all, through the actual medical division first, and then it's sent to the colleges individually. So make sure, try not to look at statistics because it's only going to be, 1%, maybe 0.5% here or there. So it doesn't really matter. And it changes year on year.
Completely agree. And I mean, you guys are all about to start. So just to add to that private school, state school thing, I mean, I was state school. What I would keep in mind is one kind of when you get to Oxford, it's not something that I would say like at least 99% of people, they don't discuss it. There's certainly not a clique that, okay, these are the state school students, these are the private school. You got people coming from all across the world, different countries. It's not necessarily something that unless there may be a small minority who do that. It's not necessarily a thing. But also, kind of at any medical college, if you look at Oxford medicine statistics and you look at kind of how things worked this year, and you look at the admission success rate, 73.2% of applicants who are attending from state schools, 26.8% were from private schools, and the success rate was actually a little bit higher for state schools, about the same. So it is about 73% state, 27 private. No matter which college you pick, medicine is a very diverse course. You find kind of very friendly people at any college. It's particularly for medicine because kind of they interview looking for communication skills, empathy, teamwork, so on, that it's unlikely you'll have a bad experience either way. So that's definitely not something I would worry about. If you've heard any reputations of snobbery or anything like that, as you can see, majority is state school, but equally, if you're independent school, you have the same success rate. So neither advantage nor disadvantage. And everyone is welcome. It's not something that would be a problem either way. The Oxford Islamic Society does have a great guide about student life at different colleges. Good to see that in the chat. And what else? Any scientific sort of. What kind of GCSEs do Oxbridge applicants generally get? Cambridge is a little bit more holistic. So again, we're looking for majority eights and nines, maybe some sevens, but they don't necessarily score it algorithmically. So at Cambridge, something like very high UCAT would compensate for reasonably low GCSEs. Whereas at Oxford, with the algorithmic scoring of GCSEs, you can see that the kind of range you'd be aiming for good chances of interview probably around kind of nine grade eights or nines, maybe eight grade eights or nines, but certainly less than that would put your chances as very low. So if you look at kind of the proportion of people who are being given interviews, when you get to less than seven grade eights and nines, that does make things a bit tricky. And keep in mind that it is contextualized to your school performance. So while eight might be okay if you're at a lower performing school, at a higher performing school, maybe you'd be wanting 9, 10, 11. In terms of the percentage of grade eights and nines, again, to have reasonably high chances, you're aiming for kind of 90% or above. At a lower performing school, perhaps 80 could work, but once you're getting less than that, your chances become low. So depending on what your GCSE stats look like, may influence whether you pick Oxford or Cambridge, given that Oxford is a lot more heavy on proportion of A star. Mary, I think we already answered the online versus in-person question. So basically, almost all of them are online, but a couple of Cambridge colleges are in person. You can find it on their website. Is six grade eights and nines with three sevens low chances? Well, kind of you can look at the data here, and you can work out accordingly what percentage you'd be at. is definitely in more of the riskier range. And so depending on kind of the distribution and how many nines there are, could be that Cambridge is safe. So we're going to get asked physics and maths questions at Cambridge interviews. It's not necessarily the case. It's just that they might be inclined to ask some. And quite a few students have got them in the past, generally with stuff relating to the human body. So stuff like electrical potentials, stuff like pressure in the context of blood circulation. And I mean, so Akhil and Shreya, you're not allowed to tell us what the questions were, but just in terms of how helpful was preparing physics for you personally? Did you do any physics sort of preparation and was it helpful or unhelpful?
I didn't do any physics preparation beforehand. It's not something I took at A level, but I did make an effort to apply to a college where I sort of knew that they don't really ask physics questions. I know that at some colleges there's like a reputation where you will be asked about chemistry in quite some detail. So it is worth researching into that before putting in an application.
For an idea of which ones, obviously it can be worthwhile hearing about sort of reputations and even like emailing the tutors. But for a very rough idea, you can see which ones have expressed being potentially open to not having three science maths. So at the majority of colleges for Cambridge, you are looking for three science maths A level, and they do kind of quite clearly address how your chances go down if you don't have three science or maths A level. But you can see that they have a list of colleges that seem to be open to you not having it. And if you look at which ones they are, so not to say that you won't be at any disadvantage, but you might be at a comparatively less disadvantage at some of them. They have a list of some that might be more open. And if you look at this list of colleges that might be open to you not having three science or maths, or at least considering your application, these are probably the ones that won't ask you as much physics. So if you look at the ones that they've listed here, and you've said that, for example, to apply to these, you need at least one science or math subject, these seem to be the ones that perhaps could have a lower weighting on physics, if you are trying to think about one that you're worried about, looking at these data here. None of the other unis ask you science questions. With the non-Oxbridge questions, online or in person is 50-50. For Birmingham and your grade sixes, it may be a challenge, although it depends what subjects the grade sixes are. So they're prioritizing kind of maths, English language, English literature, sciences. And if you have a six in several of those subjects, then it definitely can be a problem because of the way that they score it. In Cambridge, you only attend one college. Does four A levels put you in an advantage? No, it doesn't. It's not something that they kind of score objectively or something that is going to give you kind of more chances of getting an interview or an offer. It's one way of showing academic capability, but there are lots of others. And just for reference, the people here, who did four, who did three?
I do four.
You do four?
Yeah, I do four.
Yeah, I do three.
I
Three?
do four.
You do four. Okay. And I mean, did any interviewer question you? Why do you only have three A levels?
Nah, they didn't look at it at all. I mean,
If
I
you
did.
look at it, it makes no difference. Exactly. So we got some do four, some do three, everyone treated in the same way. And if you look at, for example, statistics on the Oxford website, we've got percentage of people with three or four. So 61% of applicants have three A levels, 32.6 have four. So it's a pretty even split. And it's not that either one is going to be prioritized. You're going to be shortlisted based on UCAT and GCSE, or at Cambridge, more heavily on UCAT, and then it's going to be down to your interview performance. So if you're comfortable doing four, you'd enjoy doing four, by all means you can. I did four, but it's definitely not necessary. And if you think it's going to distract you from your UCAT or from getting A stars, then definitely better to do three. It's not necessary. Let's see. Yesterday, we talked about quality over quantity regarding supercurriculars and work experience through good reflection. But for Oxbridge, where the interviews are scientific, how do you show this reflection? It's not a very big part of the Oxbridge interviews, to be honest. Like, they don't ask you about reflecting on at least the skills and the kind of the communication side of things as much. They may have in parts, but it's not as big a part of it. And in terms of supercurriculars and work experience, anything scientific that's on your personal statement, might ask you a little bit about to get you started, to kind of ease you into the interview. So in your personal statement, have a couple of scientific things that you'd be comfortable talking about and have those in there. Go here, yes, they do look at academic stats post-interview at Cambridge, especially because they give out such a large number of interviews to start with. To some extent, it is looked at after interview as well. EPQs are EPQ good if UCAT isn't that good? EPQ doesn't compensate for UCAT in any way. There's no relationship between them. EPQ can at some universities like Leicester, Keele, Sheffield, those ones, they can give you a reduced offer. But otherwise, the EPQ does not affect in any way your application. Having the research can affect your application. You can talk about it at interview, but that research being called EPQ or being called independent research project makes no difference. And having the EPQ can sometimes be a little more hassle in terms of getting the qualification, the planning, the logbook, and so on. So out of the people here, any EPQ doers? Did any of you do it?
Yeah, I did one.
I would
Did
say
one?
yeah.
I did one as well.
You did one. And one of you, I think, is gone. That's okay. Shreya, you did one?
No, I didn't.
You didn't do one. Okay. Now, in terms of the people who did one, how did you end up using it? If at all, how did it come up, or how was it relevant for you?
I used it a lot. Like it was my so I did it on CRISPR, and I sort of went really deep into it and had like lots of sources and stuff, and I put it in my personal statement, and I was like, I really went deep into it that like whatever they asked me, I could answer it.
You
And
talked
then,
about it at interview. You talked about the
yeah,
CRISPR. So you didn't talk
yeah,
about the process of EPQ. You talked about the CRISPR. What
yeah,
about
yeah,
you,
obviously,
Akil?
yeah.
What came up for you? What did you talk about at interview?
Sorry, was that for me?
Yeah. So what was the significance of EPQ for you in your application?
So interestingly, I just put it in on my UCAS form that I did do an EPQ, but it wasn't discussed anywhere else in my application. So I think that shows that it's not that important to a medical application. But I thought there were better things, better sort of research that I did that was more interesting that I would have liked to talk about a bit more at interview that I did put into my application. So I don't necessarily, as you said, Ojas, it could be any sort of research. It doesn't have to be as structured as an EPQ.
And I mean, Shreya, you didn't have one. I didn't have one. Did you face any disadvantage? The interviewers say anything?
No, I definitely didn't. I just got asked in detail about something that I wrote in my personal statement that was a bit more scientific. So I don't think EPQ put me at any disadvantage at all. Yeah.
Okay. So I think I would completely agree with that. And I would say personally, for Oxbridge applicants, the EPQ, if you have the intrinsic motivation to do the research, doing it in the form of an EPQ and having a strict word count, having to submit it by a certain deadline, having to do a logbook, having to do planning, a qualification, and have it be marked by a teacher who knows nothing about science in the first place. I don't know how any of that is necessarily going to help your medical application. The doing the research very much can. The CRISPR very much can, being able to talk about it. The EPQ in itself for something like Oxford, Cambridge, Imperial, UCL, I would say not necessary. And in fact, I remember hearing a story of an interviewer and he asked me, what is this EPQ thing? I'm not sure what it is. So many students are telling me about it. This is a genuine story. This is not a joke. This was at one of the northern universities. So the thing is that a lot of these doctors who are taking the interviews, they might be trained overseas. They might not have done high school in the UK. So they obviously know what CRISPR is if you talk about CRISPR. But if you say EPQ, that doesn't necessarily mean anything to them. And like I said, there was a doctor who didn't know. So if you are talking about EPQ at interview, you should very much say what it was, that you did a research project and you researched this and this is what you learned. And that's how it's going to be useful. but you don't necessarily need the acronym EPQ to be able to do that. So the only time I would say EPQ itself is meaningful is if you want to apply to one of these Leicester, Kiel, Hull York, Sheffield, Lancaster. Then you can get a grade reduction. But otherwise, not necessarily helpful. Does Oxbridge consider extracurriculars like grade 8 in violin? Did any of you guys talk about random extracurriculars like grade 8 in violin? We have a lot of shaking of heads. I think that should make it abundantly clear that these things are not part of the application process. And even for MMI universities, it's not something that they're looking for. But if you can reflect on it for questions like how do you deal with stress, it can be okay. But you don't need to have grade 8 violin to be able to deal with stress. There are many ways to be able to do that. So don't feel worried if you don't have that. For Oxbridge, how do you make a separate application to other med schools? You don't necessarily make a separate application. You make one application to all your med schools, and one of your 4 choices would be Oxford. So for the questions about how each university scores GCSEs, look, they're all covered in the guide that I sent you the link to a few times. So you can just check that out. Birmingham is going to score your top GCSEs, particularly including maths, English language, English literature, and biology, chemistry. And you get maximum points for 8 and above. So 8 or 9. Does Oxbridge place a lot of emphasis on work experience? Not really. It's certainly not essential to get in. Occasionally, you might get asked questions about it if it's on your personal statement to ease you in, but it's not something that's being used as a selection criteria. Which unis consider further maths GCSE? I mean, they all count it as a GCSE. It's certainly not necessary, but it can count as one of your grade 8s or 9s. If you get 3 A's for your predicted, will Oxbridge consider you? Unfortunately not. You have to have A star AA for Oxford, 2 A stars for Cambridge. Oh, interesting question. If the interviewer asks you something and it's the same stuff on your personal statement, have you guys all done that? Talked about similar stuff? Yeah. So that's totally fine. If you weren't to do that, it would be a concern. Because then what's all the things on your personal statement? Are they false? Or you definitely want to talk about similar things. In fact, if they can see your personal statement, they might ask you about it rather than the other way around. So if they're able to see it, it might be that they see on the personal statement and they ask you. Are there any supercurriculars that would be recommended not to boost the application, but to broaden their scientific knowledge? I like it. These guys are now thinking in the right frame of mind. So not chasing after extracurriculars, but trying to broaden their knowledge to answer diverse set of questions at interview. What do we think? What kind of wider reading did we do to understand more about science, more about medicine?
So I did a couple of lecture series with the college I applied to, Gonville and Keys, and mine was on neuroscience and medicine. So it covered way beyond the specification about neuroplasticity, and it was something I ended up putting in my personal statement. And I think it was really interesting and expanded my knowledge in that way.
Ali, what about you? Reading widely, reading broadly?
I did read some books like Being Mortal, but I didn't write about them in my first name or anything. I feel like
So
the
no,
thing
not for personal statement now. This is like how do you generally
or just in
broaden your
general.
understanding about the human body to help you with answering the questions?
There's a good YouTube channel called the Human Institute of Anatomy, and they like go through cadavers. If you're sort of into that and you don't get disgusted, I'd recommend them. But like it's interesting seeing that.
And Akhil, wider reading, learning about the body.
I think for me, it was a lot about sort of as a starting point, looking at what we're learning in A-level biology and then exploring that further outside the classroom. I mean, my teachers prompt me to do that, but it's quite interesting. And also, later on in the year, when these Oxbridge sessions are running by MyUCAT, we do start learning sort of those topics that are pushed beyond the A-level specification. For example, I think one that came up in a mock interview was fetal hemoglobin and how that's different from adult hemoglobin. So that's not explicitly covered in A-level, but it's sort of pushing it further beyond.
That is a very, very common interview thing as well. So fetal and adult hemoglobin, oxygen, hemoglobin dissociation curves, genetic stuff, like scans, these are quite high yield things for sure. In terms of like my recommendations for reading broadly, 100% start with your A-level biology. If you read ahead in your A-level biology, it's going to help you either way. Whether or not you're even applying to Oxbridge, if you're going to have to know it by the end of your end of May. So reading ahead in A-level biology would definitely be the first thing to do. Any human-related content, any organ systems, any genetics. Next step would be to read about kind of any organ systems that are in other A-level exam boards, but not yours. Know the basics of them. Because if they're asking you about the kidneys, and the last time you did kidneys was in year 11, it might be tricky to come up with ideas. And the whole thing is about coming up with ideas. So that would be helpful. Human Institute of Anatomy channel, definitely you can check out. There's others, like one called Osmosis, I think is quite good. In terms of websites, I think textbooks, medical textbooks can be quite heavy in most cases. So like one website that is really nice, say Teach Me Physiology. This covers it in a really accessible, easy to understand way. And if you just pick like a random topic, if you're bored one day, let's learn about the lungs, let's learn about gas exchange. And in really simple words, it tells you a little bit about gas exchange. You can understand it in an easy to access way. And so once you've finished your A-level content, you might want to do some reading here. What also works nicely for some people is like 5 minutes a night from this book. This is one book that covers the majority of the first and second year Oxford medicine content. And this is the kind of stuff that the tutors like to ask because they like to ask about the stuff that they teach anyway. So be inclined to maybe read 5 minutes a night of this, but definitely starting with your A-level biology knowledge because that's what they're expecting you to have. And the stuff beyond that, they kind of want you to apply your A-level stuff to get. So first the A-level biology. If you finish that, then just reading broadly about different organ systems, genetics, experimental design. For experimental design, definitely a book I'd recommend called Bad Science would be quite good. And definitely this reading and this understanding is less about kind of building a number of supercurriculars. It's more about just broadening your understanding of medicine to apply it to different questions. Would this be beneficial for dentistry? No, not at all. This is only to answer the scientific questions at Oxford. So for dentistry, the only time a book is ever going to come up is if you were to relate it to like, why do you want to study dentistry? Or you were to relate it to some other kind of question, like a hot topic. So for dentistry, really just read whatever you enjoy. And for most medical schools, it's the same. It's just for Oxford specifically that I think having a broad overview of science and reading ahead in biology can help. Is a 60 hours internship in a hospital significant when applying to medical college? Very unlikely. It's more about how you can reflect on your skills in the number of hours. Although for graduate entry, in some cases, there's a requirement for certain hours. For the undergraduates, nothing like that. What wider reading do you need to know before interview for dentistry? So just like Henna gave you some advice before to go through the medicine list on the medicine program for medicine content, in the same way there's a dental list on the dental program. If you look at what's covered in our dental program, that's a list of hot topics and things for dentistry. Let's take one question each. I'll let you guys pick and then probably finish off. So if you any question you think you can answer really well and that's interesting, feel free. Is the food at Oxbridge taste?
I think so someone said how should we allocate time to different parts of the application? So I could say right now, focus on your first of all mocks, like do really well on your mocks because if you don't get the grades, you won't be able to apply it anyway. And make sure you're also starting to do some UCAT revision. So it doesn't have to be anything like intensive, just like light UCAT revision. if you like still didn't buy MedEntry or Medify, there's Past Medicine that's free, and there's the official UCAT tests, but save those for later. Uh, and then just after your mocks, after you smash them, you're gonna revise for UCAT, and then make sure to also in the summer, do something that's like research based or something. If you're trying to apply to Oxford or Cambridge or UCL, Imperial, like the big ones, the ones that like want research, because then that will help you not just with your interviews and personal statement, but also help you when you get to uni as well, because you'll have a more well-rounded sort of understanding and knowledge.
I think in terms of Oxford interviews, I'd say obviously each college is different, but you can have quite a few. So I had three, and I know people who had five because you had two or three from different colleges, and they can test you on literally anything. I know some people say you can have like really abstract, weird questions like why is the sky blue and stuff, but all of mine were scientific. I know you can get asked in your personal statement. A couple of people I know did, but I didn't really get asked. I didn't get asked anything really. And basically, it was just them asking you straight away, science, science. And yeah, I think the key thing is just keep going. Don't stop talking. They just want to hear your ideas, and they can slap you down straight away. I remember one of my interviewers was a bit didn't like what I was saying, so he just said, "Let's move on." But they'll keep they're going to be like that, especially because they got so many people to get around to. So yeah, basically all science. For me, there was nothing about personal things at all. But obviously, this varies college to college. I know some people did have stuff on like their work experience. So if it's obviously interesting and science related, then you could get asked on it. But yeah, make sure you prep your sciences from year one and two, and of course go above and beyond with wider reading. And yes, the food is good. I just had my offer holder day, so very good.
I'll take a question on. See, I see a lot of people talking about physics at A level, and if they're going to ask you about physics at your interview. I think what I was told when I was applying is that they don't expect any knowledge outside of the A levels you already do. So, for example, if they do ask you a physics question, they'll build it up from the ground. They won't expect you to have the same level of knowledge as an A level physics student. And I also saw a question about the cost at Cambridge. I think I researched a bit of that as well. And I think it's actually comparable and sometimes much cheaper than other universities like Manchester and Sheffield. I don't know why that is, but it is.
I mean, the reason why mainly is because, well, you pay the same tuition fees. But firstly, depending upon what your family income is, Cambridge, Oxford have more generous financial support than anyone anywhere because the colleges have a lot of money from slave trading and whatever else in the past that other universities around the UK don't have. So they are able to donate some of that money to students generously. So that is the first thing. The second thing would be the 8 week terms. So because we have much shorter terms at Oxford and Cambridge, and it's only 8 weeks three times, as opposed to maybe almost all year at other universities, it can work out a lot cheaper in that sense. So, for example, my rent each year is £4,500, whereas I know people in London paying more than double that, and even universities like Manchester, Sheffield will be probably quite a bit more than 4,500. They also are likely to offer you accommodation for multiple years, maybe even all of the years of your degree at some colleges, while at other medical schools you might need to live out and again be paying for 52-week contracts more expensive. And apparently the slave trading comment was quite controversial. I will retract that. But I mean the history of the Oxford colleges is quite public online. So yeah, I'll retract that one. Did you all get to answer one, or is anyone missed?
I didn't get to answer one. Just to add on to the physics one, just before I do another question. So I did get asked about physics at my interview, but I'm assuming that's because they knew I took physics at A level, but it was very sort of basic GCSE physics. But then I kind of added more on top from what I knew from A level. So I don't think there was any expectation to know anything beyond sort of GCSE physics for me. I see a question about how do we know what different unis want to hear? And that will be on their website at interviews because I looked at Bristol and in UCL, and they listed out the stations that they may be asking at interview. And most of my interviews followed that exact structure and that kind of theme of topics. So try and look for information to do with the stations that are listed on the website. So things like teamwork and leadership. Reflect on your work experience, reflect on your life at school. Maybe you're on the head girl team or something like that. So I think looking at the stations on the website and then kind of reflecting on your personal experiences will give you an idea of what the unis want to hear at interviews.
For sure. And I think just to cover the physics thing, well, I would say I've definitely come across a few applicants who are blindsided by the fact that they got physics and didn't do physics A level. Now, in theory, yes, they should accommodate for the fact that you haven't done it. But that does depend on how generous the tutor is feeling. And his understanding of what is normal for a GCSE physics student might not be the same as yours. So, to keep in mind, I would think, given that it's likely to be associated with medicine, there's not that much physics to do with medicine anyway. And in particular, if you think about the electricity topic, all about membrane potentials, that side of things, if you cover anything to do with the heart, the circulatory system, that's pretty much it. Maybe a bit about pressure, think about the lungs. There's not that much that they can really ask about physics. So I would go on a website like this, like Teach Me Physiology. Is there any physics associated stuff here? Probably if they're going to ask you physics stuff, it'll be in the context of medicine as opposed to something completely random. So they're not going to give you, say, like some electromagnetism question, or at least it's unlikely, and ask you to discuss kind of deriving equations or anything. It's going to be in the context of medicine. So for the physics thing, I would say, yes, you could worry about it, or you could take some proactive steps to find out a little bit about physics, and think about what relates to medicine and protect yourself against being caught out there. Brilliant. I think let's leave that there then, just because it's getting quite late. And I promised to help some people pick up food in 5 minutes from now. So let's leave things there. Thank you so much, everyone, Akhil, Ali, Shreya, Sahib, for all of the advice. I think it's been really brilliant for everyone here. And so I hope you guys, students, found it useful. Quick reminders, recordings are going to go on to probably YouTube, something like that, and then emailed to you guys. You really want to fill in the work experience form if you have a certificate, although 170 people already have. So it seems like you've been listening. Make sure you have joined the WhatsApp group where further information will be shared.